When I first moved to Mexico, there was one thing in my brain that I could not stop noticing, or honestly, not noticing. Because coming from the United States, I was used to seeing homeless people constantly under highways, outside stores, near intersections, tent camps everywhere. And it became so normal in America that eventually I stopped even reacting to it. But after living in Merida for a few months, I kept having this weird thought like, wait a minute, where is all the homeless? And before anybody gets offended, no, I'm not saying that homeless doesn't exist in Mexico. I know it does probably somewhere. And I also know that Merida does not represent all of Mexico. But compared to what I was used to seeing in the United States, guys, this difference felt massive. Therefore, I started researching it because I genuinely wanted to understand why homelessness looks so different in Mexico. And the deeper that I looked, the more complicated that this answer became because apparently homelessness absolutely exists in Mexico. But a lot of people explain that it often looks very different than homelessness in the United States. And one of the biggest reasons that people kept bringing it up was family culture. In Mexico, multi-generational families are way more common. Kids stay home longer. Grandparents live with families way more often. Relatives help each other more financially and more often. Therefore, some people told me that there's a stronger family safety net here, so people don't usually end up completely on the street. And once I heard that, the whole thing started making a lot of sense because in America, there's a huge culture in independence. Move out early, handle everything yourself, figure life out alone. But that independence becomes brutal if somebody falls behind financially. And honestly, I started thinking about that. The conversation completely changed in my brain. But then I found another thing that people keep mentioning: housing costs. And this is a part that hit hard too, because in the United States, housing has gotten insanely expensive to the point where people with jobs still struggle to survive. Therefore, when people fall financially behind in America, things can collapse really fast. Rent, insurance, car payments, healthcare, debt, everything stacks on top of each other. But in many parts of Mexico, housing is still more affordable overall compared to the major cities of the US. It's not cheap for the locals necessarily, but it's different, and that difference totally matters. But then I found another part of this conversation that got me even more interested: drug addiction. And this topic gets uncomfortable really fast, but a lot of Americans already know that the US is dealing with massive fentanyl and opioid crisis right now. And many people pointed out that addiction plays a huge role in visible homelessness in the parts of America that I'm thinking of, especially major cities. Therefore, some people explain that homelessness in the United States often becomes far more visible publicly. And once I started comparing that to Merida specifically, the contrast started feeling huge. And honestly, it first kind of felt a little eerie to me because in my American mind, I expected to see tents everywhere. And when I didn't, I kept wondering, am I somehow missing that part of the city? Like my brain genuinely did not process it at first at all. But then I found another thing that people keep bringing up to me: work, street vendors, food stands, people selling snacks, people fixing things, tiny cash businesses, independent hustles everywhere. And honestly, I think Americans underestimate how many people have many ways to survive in Mexico outside of traditional jobs. Therefore, some people told me struggling financially in Mexico doesn't always lead to visible street homelessness the same way that it leads to in the United States. And that's why I thought it was really interesting to think about, because in America, life can feel extremely rigid. Like you fall behind financially once, the system hits you like a WWE finishing move. Mexico sometimes feels more adaptable, not easier, just more flexible in certain ways. And I think that distinction matters a lot. But then I realized something important as well. Merida is not necessarily the representative of Mexico as a whole. And that's important because every time I mention something about Mexico online, people immediately remind me that Mexico City is different, Tijuana is different, Cancun is different, Northern Mexico is different, Southern Mexico is different. And they're completely right, guys, because Mexico is huge. Therefore, I'm not pretending my personal experience in Merida automatically represents this entire country. I'm just talking about what genuinely surprised me after moving here. And honestly, that's why I make these videos. Because I notice something, I get curious, I research it, and then I realize that the answer is usually way deeper than I expected. And the funny part is, the longer I live in Mexico, the more I realize how many things I accept as normal when I was in America. Actually, they aren't normal everywhere else. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that living abroad teaches you. You stop assuming that your country's version of life is the default version of the human experience. But I also think that Americans and Mexicans misunderstand each other constantly online. Some Americans exaggerate how dangerous Mexico is, and some people exaggerate how bad that life in America is. Reality usually lives somewhere in the middle. And that's what I'm trying to understand while I'm living here. Not what country is better, just what way of life is different between these two. And this is the things that genuinely shocked me after moving here. So now I'm curious, if you're Mexican, do you think that homelessness is less visible where you live compared to the United States? And if you're American, was this one of the first things that you noticed when you moved to Mexico? Drop a comment and let me know, because I'm still learning about all this stuff too, guys. And if you enjoy these conversations where we explore real differences between Mexico life and United States life together, then make sure you subscribe. I'm definitely not an expert in any of this. I'm just a guy from the United States living in Mexico that notices things, gets curious, and then falls down these rabbit holes trying to research and understand along with everybody else.